President Joe Biden will host top U.S. military leaders today at the White House. This annual gathering is taking on special significance as the war in Ukraine enters a risky new phase. At a time when the United States plans more military aid, a variety of topics will be on the table for discussions by senior military leaders and members of the President's National Security Council. The event includes a formal West Wing meeting, as well as a dinner in the President's residence tonight. Spouses of the military leaders will be there for that. While the annual military policy meeting rarely makes headlines, weighty issues are on the agenda this year, and they're topped by the crisis in Ukraine, with growing concerns that a grinding conflict there could imperil European security for years to come. Russia says the war has entered a new stage. The Kremlin says Russian forces are methodically seeking to liberate the Donbass region of eastern Ukraine, including the cities of Donetsk and Luhansk. Western allies anticipate Russia's campaign could last many months. The United States is expected to announce another military aid package for Ukraine in coming days. It could match the $800 million pledged only last week. US forces are not fighting in Ukraine, but are indirectly engaged, arming, training and financing Kiev's forces. Last month, President Biden asked Congress for record peacetime spending on the military for the upcoming fiscal year, a budget of $770 billion. The meeting today comes amid questions about the future of NATO forces in Europe, including whether to install a permanent presence on the Defence Alliance's eastern border with Russia.
Yes. You all have devoted your lives.
The democracy is united in our opposition.
Let's go live now to WION's correspondent Susan Tehrani. She joins me now from New York. Susan, good to see you again today. This meeting at the White House today, is this a reflection of the fact that the Biden administration is now essentially accepting that the situation in Ukraine is going to become a long-term grinding conflict that could certainly overshadow the rest of President Biden, what President Biden hopes is just his first term in office?
Right, definitely an issue that the Biden administration has been signaling. President Biden really did mention that a few weeks ago. He said that this war may be a long war. We've heard European officials also make that claim and assessment as well. What's interesting is that Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, continues to insist that this war would be over had the United States and other NATO member states assisted him properly with the proper weapons and perhaps taken more preemptive measures against Russia with sanctions and whatnot, and we wouldn't be in the situation that we are right now. So the question that many are asking right now is the possible prolonged status of this war the cause of not having adequate action on the part of the United States in the first place, and how long is it going to take, and whether or not there would be adequate support for that moving forward.
So we're expecting this announcement of perhaps another $800 million in weapons shipments to Ukraine, and certainly the president's got more money available to him to carry on digging deep in that regard in the weeks ahead. But how difficult is it going to be for President Biden to keep walking this line that he's not putting any American troops into Ukraine, particularly in a week in which we have learnt that at least some retired US military figures have volunteered to sign up with the Ukrainian International Brigade, are supporting Ukrainian forces on the ground in Kiev and in other locations across the country. I mean, that could very easily be misinterpreted by the Kremlin if the Kremlin so chose, couldn't it?
Absolutely. And, you know, what's alarming is that
How you doing?
Doing good, sir. How are you?
Yes. You all have devoted your lives.
The democracies united in our opposition.
Well, I think we lost Susan there for a second. We were just about to ask her. I think she may be back with us again. Let me just try that question one more time. Susan, we were talking about how complicated it's going to be for President Biden to walk the line of insisting that there are no American boots on the ground, when we do know that there are at least some retired US military figures who have now signed up for that international brigade that President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine has formed.
And you know what's interesting about that is that there hasn't been any kind of sort of condemnation, or at least any statement officially coming out from the U.S. government to sort of prevent U.S. citizens from joining that international brigade that's inside of Ukraine. Of course, these are private citizens. They can do what they can. But one notable person that has recently joined in the past few days is an MSNBC commentator, a media commentator who was a former naval intelligence officer named Malcolm Nance. So he appeared in a suit and tie on television the night before, and then the day after, he was seen in Ukraine joining the military forces holding a Kalashnikov. And then again, in another segment, he was sitting and analyzing the situation on the ground in Ukraine. So, you know, first of all, this brings into question not only the ethics of journalism on the one hand, what message this is trying to send to the American public on the other, whether or not you know, it's safe to go over there and join this recruitment International Legion of Defense. And also, I really found this, and I think it's very important to note about how sensitive and delicate it is for Americans to go and join, as you mentioned, and how this could get out of hand and be misused by the Russians. According to the Ukrainian government, units of the international fighters formally do fall under Ukraine's regular armed forces and report to Ukrainian commanders. So they have been open that international fighters, including Americans, can go and join this international brigade. However, Russia has announced that it would consider foreigners fighting in Ukraine to be mercenaries. That means that, according to Russian officials, if they are captured, it's not clear whether or not they would be entitled to prisoner of war status and how they would be treated. So their status in Russia when they're captured would be unidentifiable, and then that would put the war into a whole new dimension, and relations between the country of origin of these mercenaries and Russia in a very difficult state. So yes, it's a very complicated situation when individuals go, and it will be very hard to see how the administration from a governmental standpoint can distance itself if and when something goes awry in situations like this.
Missing in action, ethics in US network news. Very much in action for us today in New York City. WION's Susan Tehrani. Susan, thanks very much indeed for that.